We've got a one warship that is apparently up to this task, and it hasn't even got any bloody guns on it. They took the guns off it.
It seems to me in all of this that Starmer's primary concern, and obviously it's a concern that has to be had by a prime minister, but at some point his only concern was this consistent with international law?
We are quite clearly, incapable of defending ourselves right now, apart from our nuclear deterrent.
Once the house is on fire, you might point at the house and say that house shouldn't be on fire, but it is, and it is on fire. And the problem is, what actually is the best form of defensive operation?
Nobody knows what the goal is.
I do worry that the legalism of the Starmer approach will actually mean that we are wasting kit simply to maintain the idea that we're behaving purely defensively.
So what are you saying, that you think we should be bombing Iran? Really?
I do. Oh, 100%.
But then what did we learn from Iraq then? What's the difference between that and Iraq? Hello and happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday, everyone.
Hope you're all having a good week so far. Well, my God, it's all going off, isn't it?
It is, and I don't know about you, but I an unusual emotion for me, but I do feel a bit of humility, really, in the face of it all, because the sheer scale of it is daunting, isn't it? And I sent you a message yesterday saying it's more like COVID than Ukraine.
Yes.
And I guess what I was driving at is that it reminds me of that sense I had in the early phase of the pandemic, and indeed throughout, that I had no idea where it was heading. And yes. I don't.
I thought that was perfect, that analogy, because obviously everyone's saying, oh my God, is World War III breaking out?
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess there must have been a time in 1913 and in 1936 and 7 and 8 that people sort of felt, how much is this conflagration going to spread? But then when you said it feels like COVID, it's exactly right. It feels like something menacing, threatening, but completely alien and unknown.
Yes, I agree. And I every time I turn on the news channels or whatever, there's something. I literally just before we came on air, I saw there are explosions heard in Doha, and the Revolutionary Guard, the Iranians, are claiming that they've at least holed a US tanker, yet to be confirmed. Yeah. And it's spread from Karachi to Sri Lanka to Cyprus to Turkey. I mean, it just seems that every time an hour passes, another place or another issue is involved, and one wants to kind of draw lessons, achieve some sort of sense of what's going on. After all, that's what we do for a living, but always conscious that there are new complexities kind of piling up on top of each other.
Yes, and I've been reminded time and time again in the last few days about the great unknown unknowns quote.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that is what we're seeing spilling out now. And what is deeply unnerving to me is the obvious lack of preparedness for some of the obvious consequences. All right, yes. You and I are sitting here with 2020 hindsight saying, well, surely they must have known they would do this and they would do that. But it seems not. I mean, we can talk about the sort of American thrust of it, but I think maybe if we just focus in a quite alarming lack of, I don't know how to say it, awareness, preparedness in the UK response to this so far.
Yes. Well, as more and more becomes clear about the sort of preamble, the prelude to this, the actual operations, it's clear that there was diplomatic and political and military exchange between most of the main players well before Trump and Netanyahu actually decided it was a go, and that it was more likely than not that it was going to be a go, and indeed why it happened when it happened has a lot to do, I think, with some intelligence about a meeting that we can discuss later. But on that basis, park for a second the now kind of central question about whether Starmer did enough to help the operation and whether he came in too late or shouldn't have come in at all. But at the very least, it seems to me that it was clear that there was going to be a war, more likely than more probable than not, and therefore, irrespective of whether or not Britain was going to be a part defensively or offensively, it needed to, the HMG needed to make considerable preparations for that possibility, which was increasingly likely.
Yeah.
And you pointed out, the fact that the warship that's going to the area won't even be ready to go until next week.
Mate, it's humiliating. We've got a one warship that is apparently up to this task, and it hasn't even got any bloody guns on it. They took the guns off it,
and it didn't reach the chief of the defence staff's desk, this request, until Tuesday morning.
What's emerged, isn't it, in the last sort of few hours this morning? A very good analysis by Tim Shipman in The Spectator, which was covered subsequently in the Telegraph this morning.
That's right.
With a lot of detail, which we should get into because it's absolutely fascinating about the state of Labour. But within all of that detail was the fact that we've got one, I think it's called an Astute class submarine, which is it's the only thing we've got out there now, which is could do anything. That's in Australia. We've got another thing, this HMS Dragon, this Type 45 frigate, which is being fitted out and cannot leave port for another week, right?
Yep.
So we're sending 2 helicopters with capabilities to shoot down surface-to-air missiles or whatever they are. They're going to Cyprus. The key fact that's come out in this report is that the Americans put in the request to use Diego Garcia and Fairfield, our base here.
In Gloucestershire, yeah.
Sometime in the middle of February, right?
Yes, exactly.
So 2 weeks ago. Now, who the bloody hell... We keep on boasting about our intelligence services, right? And our relationships with the United States in terms of intelligence. So the phone goes and says, oh, by the way, something coming up. We want to use your bases for this, right? Can't give you the full details. But okay, so presumably alarms going off left, right and centre, right? Something is about to happen. And then no action whatsoever. No preparations or anything. It's appalling.
I mean, more than that, I think that it was known in the upper echelons, both of the political and military intelligence apparatus in this country, that if it was going to be an attack, it was going to be on Iran, right? So the whole debate about whether or not to let those bases be used was live and active. And I think Shipman says in the piece that Trump and Starmer had words on the phone personally.
Lots of words,
acrimonious words on Trump's part, at least, well in advance of the decision. So,
and Matt, that to me, sorry, just to make my point clear, that to me is all fine, and we can argue through Starmer's position. I'm more sympathetic to Starmer's position, but again, as we said, the internal Labour politics are amazing. But the fact that nobody said, well, hang on a minute, we know that Iran's got the capacity to hit targets within this perimeter, and Cyprus is there, Dubai is there, all of these things could happen. That nobody thought that through and said, you know what, maybe we should get something in the area that might be able to deal with a scenario that might crop up. It's a massive corporate failing on behalf of whoever is running the bloody Navy. It's a disgrace.
But also I think it reflects real problems at the top, which is, it was put to me by someone involved in all this, that one of the problems with Starmer is that he talks to Richard Herman, the Attorney General, more often than he talks to the Chief of Defence Staff, Sir Richard Knighton. And I think that may be an exaggeration, right? But it frames it rather well, which is that it seems to me in all of this that Starmer's primary concern, and obviously it's a concern that has to be had by a Prime Minister, but at some point his only concern was this consistent with international law? Now, of course, that should be an element in the decision making. But even if you conclude, as he clearly did, he and Herman did, last week that it was the initial operation was not consistent with international law in their view, and that Britain should not be part of the first assaults, you should nonetheless be making, preparations for the consequences of what is likely to happen. The two things are not inconsistent. And this is what I find so depressing, is that Starmer's position seems to me to be, it's against international law. So, that was what I had to do. Okay, let's, just to steel man him, let's just go with that. Fine, but that doesn't mean that you don't start sending into country the necessary forces that will be needed for your quote unquote defensive operation, which you're going to need because you have troops in Bahrain, you have bases in Cyprus, you have very large British populations, expats in the area, and of course all sorts of diplomatic facilities.
Yeah, I mean, why is this submarine off the coast of Australia? What do they think is going to happen in Australia?
It is very depressing. Both of our aircraft carriers, Queen Elizabeth and Prince of Wales, are out of action.
Yep.
We really have been caught short. But even given that, I mean, there should have been more action taken in these weeks before.
Yeah.
Alongside the politics, alongside the legality discussion, which is, legitimate, all governments do it. But they should have been making preparations on the basis that there was going to be an attack, which increasingly it's clear to me there was always going to be an attack, actually.
I think it goes deeper than that. And I'm going to give Starmer some benefit of the doubt here, because it's not his fault that our armed forces are clearly just not at the races. And
that's true.
Everyone bangs on the first job of a prime minister is to secure the defense of the nation and all of that. That is as read, right? We are quite clearly incapable of defending ourselves right now, apart from our nuclear deterrent, which is all that stands between. Just say somebody wanted to do another Falklands or something like that.
Yes,
what would we do about it? We wouldn't do anything about it.
We wouldn't be able to do it at all. And I think that implicit in your point, Matt, is a very good point, which is a secondary point, which is that who was at the helm until 2024? It was the Conservative Party who are now making a big song and dance. Yeah. So on that point in particular, I think they would do well to shut up, because in the years 2010 to 2024, our defence capability was radically degraded, and we were left in a position which we're now. And to be fair to Starmer, in a general sense, he is trying to do something about. I mean, I think one of the things we've said constantly on the podcast is that he does have a keen understanding that America is no longer going to come to the rescue of Europe plus UK, and so he's trying to force up spending on defence. But I think there were tactical mistakes made here, and we are playing catch up very fast. And I noticed that after Kyriakos Kouras, the High Commissioner of Cyprus, made some disobliging remarks last night on Newsnight about how disappointed the people of Cyprus are at the UK response to the war, John Healey, the Defence Secretary, is going today. He's a very clever and intelligent politician, but he's not in himself a weapon of defence. So what they need is ammunition and missiles. I mean, and maritime support.
And Matt, Cyprus is far from alone in its open criticism of the UK government's position. Even allies like Canada are saying the quote in the Shipman piece, which was devastating, which is, whose bloody side do you think you're on?
Absolutely.
Let's get into the sort of the unraveling of how that decision made, because it seems impossible to ignore the domestic situation of this weakened government in the decision-making process. And according to Shipman, the advice given by Harmer and accepted by Starmer was actually much more up for saying, let's let the Americans use the bases. But he was vetoed by Ed Miliband, Yvette Cooper, Shabana Mahmood, and who else? And Rachel Reeves as well.
Yes, Rachel Reeves,
which was the name that surprised me in that list. I didn't know she had that much
Chancellor's chancellors always oppose wars, so you can't actually blame Reeves for that. To be fair,
just because of the amount of money it will cost. But it does. Do you read it as an indicator of Starmer's new reality? Is that he no longer holds his cabinet with an iron fist, if ever he did?
Well, probably. I mean, I read the piece with admiration, but I think the idea that a prime minister can be strong-armed by the National Security Council is for the birds. I mean, in the end, the prime minister is the one that will take the decision and give the appropriate orders to our forces. So, maybe he looked around the table and thought this is going to be difficult, but in the end, it would have been his decision. In the same way that I think that trying to blame Israel for Trump's decision is barking up the wrong tree, because it was Trump who chose to do this. He really did, and you can just one can attack Netanyahu's objectives, but what I suppose I'm saying is that yes, Starmer is under a lot of pressure at home, but this is how a prime minister's legacy is forged, for good or ill. If he genuinely thought, and I'm not sure he did, but if he genuinely thought that we should have given the US access to the bases from the start, then that's what we should have done.
But there's you can see a kind of clear thread and how the way Starmer thinks, where it became this legalistic argument about, well, once we're attacked, but then if you bake that into the thinking, and if that is true, and that was Starmer's position, that he anticipated allies being attacked, doesn't that make our lack of preparedness even more awful?
I don't think there's any defense for it at all. And I also think that, I mean, we were texting each other during Kemi Badenoch's performance on the Today programme this morning, which probably sounded more assured and persuasive than it was. But I think she does have one good point, which is, once a war is undergone, I mean, let's say you start off from the position you're not going to get involved in the first wave. In a sense, let's take that as read, okay? Because he chose that, he's entitled to whatever. But once the war is up and running, as it were, once the house is on fire, you might point at the house and say, that house shouldn't be on fire, but it is. And, it is on fire. And the problem is, what actually is the best form of defensive operation? And Kemi Badenoch's line, which is not one she's coined, it's used in strategy a lot, but it's a good line to use in this context, is that you should fire at archers, not arrows. In other words, if you just intercept missiles, if you just play defense by literally playing defense, you're intercepting missiles in the sky or drones in the sky, all you're doing is dealing with the symptoms. And actually, there comes a point after a war has passed for a period of time that even if your strategy is defensive, you have to start, in a sense, playing offense by destroying ballistic missile launchers. I mean, the gap between defense and offense in an air war like this blurs very fast. And I do worry that the legalism of the Starmer approach will actually mean that we are wasting kit simply to maintain the idea that we're behaving purely defensively.
But Matt, where does that end up though? Because if you take, she conspicuously failed to answer the first question, which was, would you be sending bomber planes over Iran now? Would you be bombing Iran? And she wouldn't answer that. But that's the consequence of her metaphor.
Well, indeed it is. I mean, I think that's the problem is that Iran, as it showed very quickly by the astonishing breadth of its attacks everywhere, is not making a distinction between people who are behaving offensively and defensively. I mean, it just isn't. That, for good or ill, we are the enemy as far as Iran is concerned. Now we can respond.
But Matt, so what, are you saying that you think we should be bombing Iran? Really?
I do. Oh, 100%.
But then what did we learn from Iraq then? What's the difference between that and Iraq?
The problem is the house is on fire, okay? As long as the house is on fire, we have to try and get the house down. Now, there's an argument for stopping, okay? I've heard people who are against this war saying we should just, America and Israel should just stop. That's a perfectly legitimate argument. But as long as it's going on and British interests are under fire, then I think Britain should be participating in the debate. This is not Iraq. It's nothing like Iraq.
Yeah,
it could be.
Don't you think it could become a little bit? I mean, obviously, it seems a real stretch to suggest we'd have actual boots on the ground, as they say.
Yes, well, that's my point. Is that I think that anything that can be done to speed the end of the conflict is a good thing.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, it's at the margins. I mean, we can have a long discussion about whether or not British planes should be flying into Iran. I don't think they will, right? My personal view is that anything that can be done to get this over with is a good thing. But it's a bit hypothetical, really.
I mean, isn't this is the problem, is that neither of us, and I don't think anybody in the world really knows what success looks like right now.
Well,
nobody knows what the goal is.
Well, there are two elements to that. One is, and I think this is an underreported lack of reporting, if you like, to go back to your unknown unknowns or known unknowns in this question, is that when you think about what a hyper-connected society the world is now, we know almost nothing about what's going on in Iran. It's weird. You know, the airwaves are 24/7 filled with this stuff, but the amount of actual detail coming out of Iran, I'm sure that there's surveillance satellite information. I dare say the military have a fair idea about what's going on in terms of impact. But in terms of the people and their response, and what morale is like, what infrastructure is surviving, whether people are, whether there is any prospect of an uprising, absolutely no idea.
Yeah.
So there's that. Then there's your good point about the sort of, to put it politely, the fluidity of the war aims. I mean, my sense, and it is a sense, is that when Trump in his first clip on Saturday morning from Mar-a-Lago invited the Iranians to rise up, he was really making a rhetorical flourish. I don't think there's any interest in the Trump administration in the democratization of Iran or in a regime change leading to, so to speak, a parliamentary democracy. I just don't buy it. I think that this is all to do with degrading the theocratic military apparatus in Iran to a point where there can be a leader that says uncle to Trump. That's it.
Yeah,
I do think that. And
but Matt, that's an incredibly irresponsible game to play, isn't it?
It is, of course. Yeah.
The great criticism of Trump 2 weeks ago was that, you said help was coming and then you did nothing, and now he's done something. He's hacked their televisions and said rise up.
We always, the West always does this. The US specifically. I mean, in 1956, Voice of America radioed into Hungary and said rise up, and no one did anything, and thousands died. In 1961, America left Cubans on the beach at the Bay of Pigs. Thousands died, or hundreds died. 1991, after Gulf War I, Bush said rise up and left the Kurds and the Marsh Arabs to be slaughtered by Saddam. It's a pattern of behavior, and it's very, very, it's vile, it's terrible. I mean, that's, to me, the worst thing. Again, what's sort of dispiriting is, if I have one sort of bat squeak of sympathy for what's happened, it's clearly the CIA and Mossad got at the early last week the crucial intelligence that there was going to be a meeting of the leadership of the Iranian regime in a place and at a time, and CIA and Mossad have that confirmed, and you have there an opportunity to take out the command and control center of the biggest terrorist, global operator in the world. Now, that is a very big temptation for Trump and Netanyahu, for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
However, the idea that you just press the button and kind of say, we'll see what happens, right, is, to your point, wildly irresponsible. Because if you'd had a series of situation room meetings, which is right, we're going to do this on Saturday, we know where they're going to be, and they did hit them, and they, as a decapitation strategy was amazingly effective. They 50 top leaders. But the problem is everyone knows about Iran is that, the Revolutionary Guard is about 200,000 strong, and it's very, very devoted to its purposes and its wealth and its power. So you can't just kill 50 people and then expect it's not Venezuela. It's just not the same. So if there was going to be that dramatic action, there had to be, you'd have thought, a plan for day two, and there wasn't, apart from more bombing.
Well, and we know that, I mean, the time scale is getting pushed out and out and out now. Hegseth, Trump said maybe 4 weeks. Hegseth yesterday, I think, said 8 weeks. And it seems to me that until we understand what the goal is, the goal now seems to be, to me, maybe it's a face-saving exercise. It's about how do we get out of this without looking like we've just been completely blundering.
Maybe, but I think Trump really does believe he can get his client king in there in the way that he's got his client queen in Venezuela. Now, that may be not going to happen, but I think he does. And actually, some of the weirdest and most surreal moments of this very weird and surreal period have been Trump talking about how they keep killing his candidates to take over from the Ayatollah, which is sort of funny, but it's also insane because they obviously do have candidates in mind. And by the way, it's not. Did you notice the Shah's son, Reza Pahlavi, got thrown under the bus? In a sort of classic Trump way. I like him, but
nice guy, but not the guy.
Nice guy, not the guy. Just
you ain't that guy. Yeah.
That's not that guy. I mean, some people say it was just amazing how quickly all that effort, right, just out the window. But he obviously does have people in mind, but they keep killing them, which is a sort of, again, it's sort of entertaining until you realize that it's sick. And I think that the only context in which face saving will become an issue is if the markets and the oil price really start to cause Trump problems, because the only thing he's frightened of in terms of numbers now, he doesn't seem to care about political popularity, which is sinister in itself, but is how the markets respond. And if crude does keep rising and so on, I can see a situation where he decides to draw stumps, but not yet.
Listen, let's take a very quick break, because let's explore in the second half how this might play out in a number of ways, not least how it might affect the Trump presidency in November. Welcome back, dear listeners. We are as muddled as anybody, which is to say very muddled, but we are sort of trying to work out the consequences of this, quite extraordinary and historic past few days. And Matt, you just mentioned before the break, Donald Trump does not seem to be remotely bothered about his personal popularity at home right now, which I find terrifying. Is that too strong? Yeah, I find it terrifying.
No. I think that is exactly the same response to his indifference, because he is someone who his whole life, before he was a politician, has cultivated and got into the folds of American popular opinion. When he was playing the fool at the World Wrestling Foundation and going to UFC fights and NASCAR rallies and being roasted. I mean, he loves popularity. He was an entertainer. He was a reality show host before he was president. So this is someone who has a sort of absolute obsession with, as Michael Wolff writes in his books, the thing Trump always says is, how's it playing? How's it playing? How's it playing? Yeah. Now, every single poll on this for a long time, and even more now that it started, says Americans do not want this war. I mean, they don't want any wars, but they really don't want this. You kidding? Iran? We thought we ended all that.
Yeah.
And they really don't want it. I mean, the hostility in America to it is absolutely phenomenal.
And yet he is reveling in it. He is reveling in it in a way that suggests one or two things. Either he misunderstands how it's going down.
I don't think that.
Or then, more problematic, he doesn't care because he's got a plan for the fact that that if people don't like it, it doesn't matter because ... Now, what would be the ... in that situation?
Because his second term methods are now in plain sight, and they're very different to his first term methods. He, in an interview with the Atlantic last year, he said in the first term he was dealing with the country and his party, and in the second term he's dealing with the country and the world. And there are a number of methods he's using. Tariffs as a weapon of diplomacy and power, as well as an economic method. Hard power warfare. Venezuela, this. I mean, he's attacked Nigeria. How many Americans know that Nigeria was bombed on Christmas Day by the Americans? And then thirdly, repression at home. You know, the deployment of ICE agents, the death of 2 people in Minneapolis, the murder of 2 people, one should say. There is a pattern here. There's a continuum here. The fact that he has talked about nationalizing elections, the fact that he sent the FBI to seize 2020 ballots from Fulton County, Georgia, the fact that Steve Bannon, who still talks to him a lot, has said, quote unquote, we should put ICE agents round the polls in November at the midterms. I mean, in a sense, none of this is hidden.
Yeah,
It's quite clear where we're heading.
So we're looking at potentially the laying of the ground for some sort of constitutional outrage.
Yes, and it'll be a hybrid because, as the great phrase used by Daniel Levitsky, competitive authoritarianism, which is you keep as Putin does, you keep the vestigial aspects of elections. You know, you don't stop elections happening, but you make sure that they come out the way that you want. You use emergency powers to bin the bits of the Constitution you don't like. I mean, you know, it is true on the question of Congress and this war. It's true that a lot of nonsense is written in this country about the rights of Congress over war declaration. In fact, the War Powers Act of 73 is quite complicated. You have to tell the Gang of 8, the 8 top congressmen and senators, within 48 hours, which they did. And then if 60 days pass, you have to go to Congress. But he's not yet to be fair, he's not yet in violation of that thing.
Yeah.
The more worrying thing is that he just storms through and demands money from Congress and carries on imposing tariffs in spite of the Supreme Court's ruling. And I think that you can see incrementally, he's just losing what touch he had with the idea of being a constitutional president. And this will accelerate, because war is an accelerant. This will accelerate that.
Yeah. And the psychological fact about Trump is he is both ignorant and completely disregarding and dismissive of precedent, isn't he?
Yeah,
he doesn't care. He doesn't care about what the past says. He's making it up as he goes along.
Very much so. And I think that but I think he's also incredibly kind of fixated by impact, and not just impact in elections, but impact upon history and future history, not past.
For sure, yeah.
You know, he wants to be remembered as a consequential president, and I think that there's a narcotic appeal in something like this. You know, everyone says, and they're right, that he promised not to do any more regime change wars, and he promised indeed not to do any more wars. But this is like, I mean, consistency is not Trump's, major feature. And also it's the scorpion and the frog, isn't it? I mean, he says he won't sting the frog on the way over the river, but then he does. And I mean, asked why, he says it's in my nature.
Yeah, that's right.
He can't help himself.
Yeah. What about Keir Starmer then? Where does this leave him, do you think, in terms of, obviously he's got the local elections coming up in May. Before all of this happened, I think it was broadly accepted that he's on the back of the by-election and then a hammering in the local elections that he is toast. Is this giving him any cover, do you think? No,
I don't think so, because I think that, to be honest with you, I think most Brits are pretty indifferent to this so far. I mean, again, with COVID, everyone was indifferent to COVID until they suddenly were sent home from work, you know.
I don't know about that. I mean, obviously it's just all anecdotal, but I've had I've had real depth of concern from people I know about what's happening. I mean, really, like, oh my God, is World War III breaking out?
I understand, and
yeah.
To take the point that we were making at the beginning, I sympathise. All I would say is I think that there's a bit of a narrative around at the moment that this is Keir's moment and it's going to save him, and I just don't buy that. I think that in a sense, actually, I mean, I don't. For a start, I don't think that Reform and the Tories have covered themselves with glory just by sort of kind of sucking up to Trump. It looks ridiculous.
Yeah,
I think the figure who has, and I don't agree with him, but I think the figure who has emerged with most clarity again is Zach Polanski.
Yeah.
Because on Sunday on Laura Kuenssberg's show, there he was, and say what you like. He just said this is illegal. Don't want it. Don't like it.
Yeah.
And there'll be a lot of people out there who are frightened and worried, or think that Trump is an evil man, or think that Netanyahu's an evil man, or whatever, a whole range of reasons, who think, we don't want Britain involved with that. And Starmer's kind of very, I was against it before I was in favor of it position may work in the sort of Labour oligarchy, but I don't think it's going to cut through to the public at all. I don't buy that.
What do you think about so we've had Trump insulting him directly, saying this guy ain't no Winston Churchill, and we've also had very uncharacteristically Starmer saying about Trump, there's no plan, and air wars never achieved their goals, blah blah blah. I mean, that's new ground for Starmer.
It is.
Do you think there's any sense? I mean, I think he's left it all far too late, and people have made their minds up on him. But it's never. I suppose historically, it's never been easier for a politician to say bugger America, because everything is so set against us as far as America's concerned.
Yes, I mean it's. The problem with Starmer is that he adopted a strategy with Trump, which was, I'm the Trump whisperer, leave it to me. I know it looks silly when I hand him the invitation in person for the state visit, but leave it to me.
Yeah.
And really, since Greenland, I think it's been clear that the wheels are coming off. And he said, I don't think there's a viable plan, and he's dead right. But all I'm pushing back against really is this idea that is doing the rounds a bit, which is that this is his Falklands in a sort of ironic sense. It isn't, and also people form their, which is not a good thing, but they form their opinions about politicians very, very quickly. And I'm afraid my view on Starmer is that he could personally go over to the Middle East now and make peace this morning. And it wouldn't make any difference to what's going to happen in May.
I think that's sadly true. Well, or it's true. Whether it's sad or not is up to people to decide. But I think that's definitely true. Listen, it's an evolving situation. We're back on Sunday with the Q&A. I know we've already had a few questions around this on for our Sunday Q&A, so we'll address your questions there, dear listeners. But who knows? We might be back even earlier.
You never know.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us on this very sunny morning down in London. Anyway, beautiful weather. That's something to be happy about. Subscribe to The New World. Please go to thenewworld.co.uk/2Matts. That's the number 2, MATTS. Send in your emails to 2Matts@tnepublishing.com. Thank you to Matt Withers, the producer of this show, the third Matt. And until Sunday at latest.
It's goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from him.
Goodbye.